How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video, we're going to talk about the Atlantic hurricane season and determine if we could see Hurricane Nicole make landfall along the Florida coast by next week, as we do now have a depiction of the GFS model taking a hurricane landfall along the Florida coast within the next 5 to 6 days. So it's definitely something we're going to need to pay close attention to over the next several days. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the entirety of the northern Atlantic at this time, at least the water vapor imagery. We do have the remnants of Lisa, which is expected to weaken under very strong wind shear, and you're probably wondering, where are we going to see the possibility of Tropical Storm Nicole developing? Well, the possibility will be just north of the Bahamas and just to the east of the Florida coast, as this area of convection right here could become Tropical Storm Nicole. And as you can see right now, there isn't much going on. Of course, there's a lot of thunderstorm activity, but you could probably tell that there's a strong amount of wind shear throughout the northern Atlantic at this time, which isn't anything unusual for the month of November, where the wind shear definitely does increase dramatically compared to the earlier hurricane seasons as a result of an increased amount of baroclinic instability. So we are seeing pretty much strong wind shear throughout the Atlantic as of right now. So there's pretty much no shot of any tropical cyclone developing under a highly sheared environment like this. However, within the next several days, we will see an upper level high move through the United States and eventually off the United States East Coast, and create a lightly sheared environment to where this area of convection could organize itself and potentially develop into a tropical cyclone and move eastward to the coast of Florida, since there's going to be a big blocking ridge just to the north of it. Taking a look at what the GFS model is stating at this time, we do have a big ridge that's right over this upper level low that's located just to the north of the Dominican Republic. At this time, we do have this big trough that's bringing severe weather to the Midwest that's expected to move eastward, and behind it we're going to see an upper level high move into the eastern Atlantic, which will lighten down the shear. But as you can see, this upper level low will pull moisture from the south, and we will see a well-defined low pressure system develop just north of the Caribbean islands, and we could see the wind shear greatly subside as this moisture moves northward. Let me show you guys the wind shear map so you guys get a better idea. So here's how the wind shear is looking right now. Of course, we do see a strong amount of wind shear as a result of this trough moving through and this other trough that's coming off the west coast at this time. And if I were to continue to move forward, however, we do see that behind this mid-latitude cyclone, we're going to see a trough, upper level high move into the eastern Atlantic, and we do see the wind shear greatly subside. So we could see this organize under the midst of very light wind shear, and we do see that the GFS model wants to strengthen this quite a bit, dropping the millibar pressure down to 978 millibars, which is easily a hurricane, but to potentially a category 2 hurricane, which is very rare for the month of November, where typically all we really see is very weak tropical cyclones. And this would make landfall somewhere between Wednesday and Thursday, between November 9th and November 10th along the Florida coast, and this would certainly be a hurricane at a millibar pressure this low. We do, and of course wind shear is very light, which is very concerning. And what's even more concerning is that the European model is also forecasting the wind shear to be very light as the solar pressure system continues to move eastward, because the wind shear is strong right now, but the European model also expects the wind shear to subside, which is showing that there's a higher amount of confidence that the wind shear will be low enough to where at least something will organize, or will likely organize, as it heads towards the Florida coast. And we're going to see a big ridge blocking ridge that's going to be to the north of it, that's going to prevent it to move out to sea. So regardless of this of whether the solar pressure system develops into a tropical storm or hurricane or not, you're still going to experience impacts along the Florida coast. Let me show you guys the precipitation map. We do see that after this ridge moves through, we're going to see another big ridge come towards the northeast and pretty much create a blocking pattern that's going to force a low pressure system towards the Florida coast rather than moving out to sea, which is definitely a major concern because, like I said, even if this doesn't develop, you're still going to experience heavy rain, strong winds, and potentially rough surf as well as a result of this pressure gradient between this blocking ridge and this low pressure system. So, however, some good news is that the European model does not want to strengthen this into a hurricane, as at best it's maybe a high, at worst it's maybe a high end or a low end tropical storm as it approaches the Florida coast, which would certainly be almost the best case scenario. But the reason why the European model does not want to develop this into a hurricane is because the European model expects a lot of dry air to be around the area, and I think that will be one of the main inhibiting factors of this low pressure system as it continues to move northwestward will be the dry air. Of course, we're in the month of November, so the amount of stability throughout the northern Atlantic is pretty much very high as a result of how much cold, dense air there is this late into the hurricane season. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for, as this heads northeastward, to not at least experience at least a little bit of dry air. But the GFS model expects that this low pressure system will fend off the dry air just enough to strengthen into a hurricane. So we're going to need to wait and see really how much stable air there will exist by the time we reach maybe this weekend to really determine how much this will strengthen as this heads towards the Florida coast. But Florida, you definitely need to at least be aware of this because I'd say it's likely we'll experience impacts associated with this low pressure system, whether this develops or not. And we could see that potential of a hurricane. That's certainly in the realm of possibilities if everything goes right with this low pressure system, if the dry air stays low enough and if the wind shear stays low enough, which at this point, the certainty that the wind shear will subside along the western Atlantic is pretty high, with both of the main computer models agreeing that the wind shear will be just light enough to support for tropical cyclone development. Well, I think will really be the X factor will be the amount of dry air. We're just going to need to wait and see how much dry air there will be along the western Atlantic to really determine if this will develop or not. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding that. But I want to move forward beyond Florida because let's say, hypothetically, this makes landfall in Florida as a hurricane. It might not be done from there because we do see it'll re-enter the Gulf of Mexico and we're going to see a big trough move through the the United States at the same time. And this will steer up northward to where we could see quite a strong storm move northward along with this mid-latitude cyclone as well. And thanks to the instability that this trough will bring just to the west of this storm, we could see strong winds and heavier rainfall as a result of baroclinic influences. Sort of like I'm definitely not saying this is going to be another Sandy by any means, but it's sort of like how Sandy developed, where you pretty much mix a very warm core tropical cyclone with an Arctic trough moving through, and that just creates a highly unstable environment for the wind speed to increase, the rainfall to increase, and we see a very powerful storm when those two things mix together, sort of like what happened with Sandy. Of course, this isn't going to be anywhere near Sandy, I'll say that right now, but we still could see a fairly powerful storm move up the East Coast, even if this does, let's say, weaken into a post-tropical cyclone. So it's at least something to be aware of. It's at least something to be aware of, at least for that possibility up along the East Coast, because maybe this could interact with this major Arctic trough that could bring a highly unstable environment to create to put the East Coast at risk for a very powerful storm. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding that and how the impacts Florida will receive as this moves closer and closer to the Florida coast. Now, Taking a look at the current 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook, we do see that the National Hurricane Center is giving this a medium chance of developing within the next 5 days, a 0% chance within the next 48 hours. But once this enters the northern Caribbean Sea, we're going to see the chance definitely increase as the conditions become more favorable for tropical cyclone development as a result of the lightly sheared environment that's expected to move in to the western Atlantic by later in the future into next week. And I wouldn't be surprised within the next several days we see the chance increase, since it's becoming increasingly likely that beyond the 2-day mark, the wind shear will be just light enough to support for tropical cyclone development. So don't be surprised if the chance does rise as the National Hurricane Center detects that beyond the 5-day mark from this point, the conditions will be even more favorable. So keep that in mind, that we could see this chance rise despite the chance being at a 40% chance. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear, like I said, the wind shear at this time is very strong, but that's expected to subside once this mid-latitude low moves through and brings an upper level high just to the right behind it, and that will create a very lightly sheared environment just off the Florida coast for this to have a higher possibility of developing. Now, taking a look at the sea surface temperatures, so you're probably wondering if the water temperatures are warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development even this late in the year. Well, the short answer to that is yes, because we do see that over this projected path for the low pressure system, we do see that the temperatures for the most part will hover at least above 80 degrees or 26 degrees Celsius, which is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. There is that small patch just off the east coast of Florida where temperatures do fall below that 80 degree threshold. However, this patch is so small where it'll make such it won't make much of a difference with a patch of colder water this small. Maybe if this were to move into the the northern Gulf of Mexico, then definitely that would enhance the chance that this will weaken more significantly and won't really have a chance to re-strengthen as it heads to the northern Gulf of Mexico, because the sea surface temperatures do fall below 80 degrees. But in terms of where where we're forecasting it to develop or primarily strengthen, it's pretty much going to have an open area of very warm waters to develop, which is certainly not good news. And this small patch of cooler water won't make much of any difference when it comes to its strengthening, as it could easily absorb the water that's just to the east of the center of circulation as this moves ashore. Now, take a look at what the ensemble members are stating from the GFS model over the next, I'd say 8 days or so. We do see that quite a few of them, I'd say most of them actually, want to take this to at least close to, if not over, tropical storm status, which is a maximum wind speed of 39 miles per hour or more. And we do see some ensemble members taking a little bit more of a stronger approach, where we do see close to hurricane status right along the Florida coast. So that's definitely something. There's definitely something you need to be aware of along the Florida coast. There is that possibility a hurricane could make landfall by next week, so make sure to be aware of that possibility. And even if this doesn't develop, you're still likely going to experience impacts when it comes to heavy rain, gusty winds, as well as rough surf. Now, taking a look at my forecast when it comes to potential Hurricane Nicole, where the GFS model is depicting that we're going to see Hurricane Nicole. So I am expecting it to take this trajectory. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's going to be an area where it could maybe avoid the United States and move out to sea, as most likely this will make landfall somewhere along the United States, whether there's a tropical depression, tropical storm, just a regular low pressure system, or a hurricane. We're just going to need to wait and see how much dry air there is before we can jump to that conclusion whether it'll develop into a hurricane or not. So make sure it's along throughout Florida to be aware of this. I know it's been very difficult for a lot of Floridians, especially after Hurricane Ian just made landfall around a month ago. This is the last thing Florida really needs right now, but you certainly need to take the right precautions throughout Florida if you are under a threat of a strong tropical storm or hurricane. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding any major changes with the forecast over the next several days. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather causes, and I hope you guys have a great day.